of, there we go. A quick overview of what I'm going to be chatting about today. Obviously, a quick summary about me and us here at Kayo. Nothing too stressful. Just a quick overview about what SEO is and why it's important, why we need to be thinking about it when you're publishing things online. And before I can even go into kind of the actual tips themselves, I think it's important you guys understand what Google do and why SEO fits in with Google and how we kind of do that. And then I'll be going into the tips themselves. So looking into something called keyword research, talking about site structure, the importance of headings, and all sorts of other bits. And finally, I'm going to go into a bit more about the pitfalls and considerations of that. It can be quite complex. There's a couple of key things that you really need to look out for when you go into optimizing your articles or blogs or whatever you're writing. And then hopefully, as I said, we'll have some time for questions at the end. So a quick thing about us, obviously we're a digital marketing agency, or we're a digital agency in Kent. As well as marketing, we offer things like software development, app development, digital consulting, little things like that. So this is kind of why we're kind of talking about SEO today. I've been working in SEO for about 3 years as my kind of bread and butter. We support mostly SMEs, so small and medium-sized businesses, both kind of locally for local businesses, but also on a national and international scale as well. So getting started then, so kind of what is SEO and why is it important? So I'm going to be calling it SEO throughout this presentation, but it stands for Search Engine Optimisation. You don't necessarily realise until you know how much SEO kind of plays into the things that you see online. So every time you order a product or type in a question, or you're looking for somewhere local and you type that into a search engine, whether that's Google, Bing, Yahoo, whatever it may be, SEO factors into that. And I guess your kind of goal as a website is to appear at the top for relevant things that people type in. So if you type in red socks and you're a company that sells red socks, you're going to want to be near the top or position 1 on Google, like the example I've put here on the right. So it's really important that the key thing here is that you can, to a certain extent, influence how your website is seen in search results. So, and there's a number of things that you can do to help with that and get your website seen more, which is what we're here to talk about today. I think I've put this data here because it's quite interesting. So depending on what position you're in, so if someone types in something relevant and all these websites come up, if you're in position 1, you've got almost a 50% chance that you're going to be clicked on. So someone's going to read your page or blog, and you might even get a new reader or subscriber, or if you're a website where it's e-commerce, you might be buying something. So it really does play an important role. So if you're publishing things online, this is definitely something that you need to be thinking about. And kind of as I mentioned before, I'm going to talk mostly about Google. Google is the dominant search engine. I think it makes up over 90% of all searches that everyone makes on the web in the UK. So when I talk about Google, I mean, I can talk about other ones like Bing as well, but considering Google is the main one, that's going to be what the main focus of what I'm going to be talking about today. I think it's important to understand Google's purpose in reference to SEO. So you can kind of see their mission statement on the screen there. And essentially, what it's saying is it wants to deliver the most useful, understandable, accessible, easiest results to their users. So to me and you who type things in every day. Um, if you're position one, you're going to be the website that makes it the easiest for users and Google to understand what that page is about. You're the best for that term and the most useful for those people. So that's Google's job. And we can help Google do that by producing amazing content and making things slightly easier to help you get to the top of search results, which is really exciting. It gives a real opportunity there for smaller businesses as well as bigger ones. So it's an exciting opportunity. So in terms of good SEO for when writing articles, I appreciate not everyone's going to kind of understand all of these. I've popped some links in so you can do your own kind of extra research. Obviously, we're only kind of covering the basics today, but if you're interested in a certain topic that I talk about today, or you want to know a little bit more, there's a lot of stuff online about this as well, from a lot of reputable sources. So I've given a couple of examples in the presentation today. Ooh, it's not. Here we go. Okay. So before you even kind of begin writing your content, there's a level of planning that you can do to already help you get to at least a decent position in search results. And this is what we call keyword research. Unless you're into SEO and kind of understand it, it may not be something that you've heard of before, but it actually plays a really high level of importance when you're talking about writing a good content piece or article, blog, service page, whatever it may be. So what is it and why do it? So it's about finding words and phrases that your audience are using when searching. So this can be, so it's like learning the lingo. So there may be things that your audience are searching for that you don't know about, or they're using certain words that are really popular and they mean the same thing as what you're talking about, but you haven't used them. And this can make a big difference in whether you come up or not in search results. So it kind of gives you a real insight into what your audience like and don't like. And this is absolutely fantastic in helping you when it comes to being more visible online. It also has amazing opportunities for shaping your content strategy. So I think we've all kind of been in a situation where you don't really know what to write next and you have to have a real sit down and think about it. And it's really obviously really helpful if you know what your audience are looking for. So keyword research can be a really good way of not only planning what content you're going to write, but also thinking of new ideas. So keywords, they're a bit like this. So it isn't just necessarily one word, it can be a phrase or a question that people are asking. So this is really good for understanding exactly how your audience are talking. Another important point as well is that it can help you get ahead of competitors. So if a competitor blog or website or what have you has a really good article that's getting them more subscribers or traffic to their website, you can see, okay, well, that looks like a good article and it's similar to what I want to write about. I can look at theirs and how can I make it better? How can I build on what they've done and make it much better so that I get to the top of the search results and people click on me instead? So this is how another way how keyword research can really help and ultimately get more people clicking on your website, some more traffic, and grow your audience as well. Right, so maybe I've sold you on keyword research, but now you've got to kind of, but how do you do it? There are a lot of paid tools available, But obviously that's not accessible to everyone. You might be working on a budget, or you don't really want to invest in that stuff. But you can still get some really, really good insights completely for free. And these are the tools that some of them that I'll be sharing with you today. Um, a lot of people use multiple tools. I've popped a link here if you're interested in looking at some of the other tools that are free. But I'm just going to be talking about 3 of them today. But I'm really hoping that it can kind of give you more of an insight into how you can do it with quite a minimal effort as well. So the first one is actually using Google itself to look at what people are searching for. So what you can do is I've taken a couple of screenshots here where I've typed in digital marketing Kent into Google, and I've kind of scrolled down. So I've gone down to the bottom of the page or looked down the whole of the first page, and I come across these sections. So the first one that I've mentioned is right at the bottom. So as if you're going to click on to the next page, it will have some of this stuff here. So basically what this means is it's showing you what other people are also searching for or related to what you've just typed into Google. So if you want to rank for a keyword, so in our case, it might be digital marketing Kent, I would type that into Google and scroll right to the bottom, and this is what I'd see. So I would see what other people were searching for, and I can use these in my content. So this could apply to anything. This could apply to a question. It could apply to pretty much anything, and this box will come up right at the bottom. So it gives you a really good idea of what else you might want to write about, or how you can put these keywords into your content, which I'll talk about a bit later, to shape your pieces. And the next kind of one is I find particularly helpful is if you type something in, again, like digital marketing Kent, and you scroll down the page, this kind of title will come up. People also ask, and it will come with some frequently asked questions that obviously your audience that's similar to you are also asking. And the great thing about this one is if you click on it, it generates more each time. So a lot of questions come up underneath. So it's kind of an endless bank of data telling you, oh, people also search for this, people also search for this. So it can be a really good way to just tap into the sort of questions that your audience are asking. I put this one in here simply because it's so valuable, but I appreciate some of you might not know what a Chrome extension is. There are tons of guides online, even from Google themselves, about how to download one. It's really, really easy. And this tool is called Keywords Everywhere. So basically what it does is it gives you, again, more data insights, but a bit more specific than the ones I've already showed you. So I'll type in Keywords Everywhere. I think it's the second result that takes you to Google Chrome. So this one on the right, and you can add the extension. And basically what it does when you download it, what you can see is when you type in something, instead of just having the kind of information on the left, you get a new section on the right, which is really interesting because it will tell you like trend data, so how many people searching and when over what periods of time for that term that you've just typed in, or you get related keywords underneath. Unfortunately, it's a bit cut off there. But you can see all sorts of other things that people have been searching for related to what you've just typed in. And again, this is an amazing way to kind of capture what your audience is talking about or looking for. And then because of that, you can match your content to match what people are looking for, if that makes sense. As I said, there's probably loads of guides on Google for that one. I can always add up a tutorial on how to add a Chrome extension into it if you guys are unsure. The final tool that I wanted to talk about is a website called Answer the Public. And I like this one. This is particularly one of my favourites. You can type in anything you like. This is what the main website looks like. You type in, for example, digital marketing, and you press search, and this sort of diagram comes up. So it tells you all of the sort of questions people are asking in relation to your topic. So maybe if you've got a recipe or you're talking about a particular type of food, you could type that main term in and it will generate all sorts of data telling you kind of the who, what, where, why, how, all the sorts of questions people are asking, which again is really useful when you're looking for what people are searching for. So you've got all this data and you know how to use it, but how do you pick the right ones? Now, this is often an issue where you're kind of inundated with all these words, but you're not sure which ones would be best for you to pick to use in your content. So there's a couple of things that will depend on which ones you use. So the first thing would be volume. So you may not know this from some of the tools you use, but it's definitely still something to consider. How many people are typing in this term per month or per week or whatever? Generally, the fewer the words that people type in, the more competitive and the higher volume it is. So, for example, instead of us targeting digital marketing, as in just those two words, we might want to be more specific and target digital marketing Kent instead, because it's less competitive and we might be competing against, for example, Oxford Dictionary, who are defining what digital marketing is. So again, you want to be thinking about how many people are searching for this month, because if it's quite competitive, your chances of kind of appearing might not, maybe quite slim. So for instance, if you're typing in something like, I don't know, if you've got a recipe and you type in, the recipe that you're going to write, if you're competing against BBC Good Food, who are the number one kind of position, the chances of you beating them are actually quite slim. To be perfectly honest, if you're a small food blog. So these are the sort of things you've got to be thinking about. So maybe instead of targeting a really big term about a recipe that has thousands of searches a month, you might want to go for something a bit more niche. So change the wording so the keywords are a little bit longer. So I'm not sure, you could say something like egg recipes for breakfast instead of egg recipes. So those sort of things that you're considering are quite important. So you're kind of evaluating which ones to pick. You're picking them, but how many should you use? My advice would be no more than 3, simply because if you target too many, it can get a little bit overwhelming. So pick 3 that you want to use per blog post maximum. And I would also say that they should be related as well. So you don't want to go for 2 completely different topics spoken about on one blog post, simply because it can be quite confusing to Google as to what the page is about. So the key things here, so consider volume when you're doing the picking your keywords. Look at the competitors. So if you like the look of a keyword, type it in Google itself and see who you'll be competing against if you do a similar piece. That would be my advice to you, and consider whether you've got the chances of appearing when people type it in. So now I've all overwhelmed you all with keyword research. It's more important to think about other things when it comes to writing your blog post. So you've got your keywords, you've picked them, you're quite confident that you might be able to rank for those or appear for those terms. So now you're moving on to, okay, I've sat down and I'm going to write, what else can I do? So a couple of things here. You want to make your blog post have a clear structure. So it may sound a little bit basic and self-explanatory, but I can't even overstate the importance of a good, clear structure when it comes to writing something. So having an introduction, kind of a main body and a conclusion is really important, because it kind of helps Google understand you've got that clear structure, as well as people as well, who want to follow it and read it, having Google understand. So essentially what they do is they read, or we call it crawl, the page, to understand what the page is about, and they will look at the content in the context of the whole page. So you want to have really good content, and you want to have a clear structure. And then also, this is kind of an opportunity in your planning. It's kind of where you're going to mention your keywords. So the keywords that you've picked earlier, you want to talk about them in your content. So you want to use those phrases throughout your introduction and your main body and your conclusion. I'll talk a bit later about how much you use them, because it's a delicate balance. But definitely a clear structure is something you want to be thinking about when you come to write. Looking at the importance of headings. So if you're writing a blog post, obviously you're going to want to use headings in your post. The way I kind of describe it, or the way Harry and the team describes it, is kind of like a cover of a book. So your H1 is your main heading. It's the cover. It reels people in, and it tells everyone what the blog post or the article is about. So that's kind of a really important one that you want to think about. So you might want to put your main keyword in there, if that's what you want to rank for. Also using other heading tags too. So these are kind of like the chapters of the book. So it kind of separates the text to explain the sections that you're about to talk about. You can use the kind of the headings in any kind of different context. So when I talk about H1s, H2s, H3s, so those are the headings, there is a way you can flag that in your web platform. So for example, if it's WordPress, you can change the headings so they're H2s or H3s. A lot of people think that you're making something a heading just by bolding it, and that's not the case at all. You might be telling people that it's a heading because you've boldened something, but that's not the same thing as flagging it as a heading. So that's something really important that I would let you guys know. I'm just trying to think of examples in terms of something like WordPress or Squarespace. It's quite easy to add or change the headings. But you might want to do a little bit of research individually on your platform about how to change the headings if you aren't sure. It's also worth saying it provides a good structure as well. Kind of breaks up the text so it's easier to read for people too. Another thing that you want to consider is, in your piece of content, linking to other areas of your website. So I've given you an example here of what it looks like on one of the Kayo Digital blog posts. So we've put a little paragraph at the end, kind of explaining who we are and our services, and it's given us an opportunity to kind of link to the different areas of the website. This is really important for people because obviously it gives them the opportunity to have a bit more of a nose around. But it's also really good for search engines as well, because you're telling them this page is also important. This page is also important. So make sure that if you can, and you've got opportunity to, linking at the end or throughout your blog post is really helpful. You'll notice as well, we've also used keywords in our text. So the text that we've linked to, we've put digital agency in Kent Digital Marketing Services. Again, this is another way to point to Google. This is what the page is about. So go to it and have a look. And that can really help with getting your website to appear higher on Google as well. So that's another factor that you want to consider. However, the caveat I would say to that is for it to sound natural. If we put literally in Kent in everything at the end of every link that we put, it would sound awful and it would sound spammy and unnatural. Not only would people kind of do a double take and go, hang on, that doesn't read right. Google will do the same as well and realize that you're trying to manipulate it. So and they could penalize you for that and not show you at all, because hey, hang on, you're trying to falsely kind of show us what this page is about, but you're doing it in a bad way. So that's definitely something that you need to consider as well. Another thing, so metadata, and you might be thinking, what is that? What are all these terms about? But basically, this is kind of, it's the title and the description that you see when you type something into Google, and you can change this. So a lot of people don't know that you can do that in your web platform. So you can change the title and you can change the description. So you can see what we've done in the example is we've used a keyword that we want to rank for in the title as well. So kind of telling everyone, this is what our page is. And it's also helping us rank for SEO agency in Kent as well, because we've said it's kind of like the review of a book in the sense that you're saying, this is good, this is what it's about, and it's enticing you to read onto the page. And you've got the description there as well, which kind of gives a brief overview of what the page is about. In terms of length, there is actually a recommended length for how long these titles should be. For the title, so the bit in purple, it's about 50 to 60 characters. And for the description, it's a maximum of 150. So this is kind of the Google guidelines on how long these titles and descriptions should be. So obviously you can type in or write whatever you want in these, but I would recommend maybe that you include a keyword or two that you've selected that's relevant for your page. And as long as it's not too spammy and it reads nicely, it looks great and obviously will help you appear as well. So you can do this by, I've given an example in WordPress. So you can download a plugin called Yoast, if you haven't got that already. And what it does is it just gives you the opportunity to change these things. It might be slightly different depending on which platform you're on. Sometimes it's already there for you to change, and sometimes you might need to download like a little app or plugin within your content management system. So, i.e., where you upload your stuff. So it's definitely worth looking into if you're not sure. I can try and answer some questions at the end if you want something more specific to what you're looking for. But I popped an example here, whereas this section just kind of acts as a guide, and you can change the title and the description in these bits here. So now I've kind of dumped all of the kind of a brief overview of some of the things that you can do. A lot of people ask me some of these questions that I thought would be best to cover. So a lot of people ask me in terms of content length, like how long should my content be for it to be good for SEO? The answer is there's no right length, and it really does depend. But what I would say is it's definitely quality over quantity. So there is absolutely no point in kind of filling words for the sake of filling words. If you say, oh no, my competitor's done a 500 word blog post about this and is appearing really well on Google, but mine's only 300 words, what should I do? The situation is that you shouldn't add words for the sake of adding words, and you've just got to think about the quality of the content and the other things that you can do, like the titles and the linking is just as important. So if you do those, I think you give yourself a really good chance of appearing well in Google. Keyword stuffing. So I've touched on this before. There's a quick example here where you kind of mention best laptop bag twice, and you read it as a person, and you think that doesn't sound quite right. Why have they used that phrase twice? Obviously, again, like I mentioned before, with the internal linking, it's an opportunity to manipulate the search engines, and that's bad. You don't do that. If you're trying to insert the keywords at every single opportunity you've got in your blog post, it's going to sound really unnatural and really spammy. So what I would say is kind of use the keywords as a guideline and mention it where it sounds appropriate, but don't kind of shove them in every single opportunity you can, because that can actually be really detrimental to both your rankings, and also people won't really want to read it as well. So the last kind of thing is the power of regular posting. A lot of people don't consider this, and it can sometimes be a little bit overlooked. So if you're regularly scheduling and sharing blog posts or articles, that's actually a really good thing, because it shows that your website is active and that you're posting new content, which means that your Google will be reading or crawling your website more often. If you leave a website and you don't post anything for a couple of months, and then you post 3 at once, or you leave it untouched for a while, Google isn't going to read your website as often. So having an active website is actually a really positive thing. Obviously, life sometimes gets in the way and you can't always post as regularly as you'd like. There's a lot of situations like that, but making an effort to post is definitely an advantage. What I would say to that is some people just kind of put a couple of sentences in and say, oh, I've done a post, and do a really quick 5-minute one, just to say, okay, well, I've posted something now. And again, that's not how that works either. You can't just post low quality content. It will be bad for both people and for search engines as well. They don't really want to read stuff that you haven't put a lot of effort in. So put, again, high quality, regular posting content, scheduling it and planning what you're going to write about is really important. So I think that's a good emphasis as well. So you might think, oh, I haven't really understood much of this today. It's going to take me a little bit of time to understand it. And that's fine. That's absolutely fine. But if you're going to take 3 things away from today, I really want you guys to remember these 3. So the first thing, if you're going to remember absolutely anything, it's going to be keyword research. So use the phrases on Google, the keyword people also asked and questions tools that they have. Use those and take advantage to get like a snapshot of what your audience are looking for. If you're going to use keyword research, natural is key. I can't emphasize this enough. Prioritize people over search engines always. Ultimately, you're writing for your audience. And if you were top of Google anyway and your content was awful because it wasn't natural and spammy, people aren't going to read it anyway. So definitely prioritize people over Google, search engines, whatever you're doing. And just remember the other aspects as well. So the headings and linking around your website and changing your metadata. So your site link information when people click on you will really also help you in terms of optimization success as well. Now, I realised that was an incredible amount of information for you guys, but thank you very much for listening. I'm going to do my best to kind of explain anything if you guys have any questions. Obviously, we're here, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Jasmine. That's really enlightening, and as you say, a lot to take in, but hopefully some really useful stuff. And there've been lots and lots of questions flooding in over the chat. So I'll start with running through some of the questions that have come through on the chat, if that's okay, and then I'll open up the floor to everybody else. So the first question is from Laura, and she asks about Google Trends and looking at Google Trends as a way to improve search. Do you think that that's a useful tool, and what's the best way to use it?
Yeah, definitely. So we use, again, it's one of the tools that we often use with keyword data. I think the good thing about Google Trends that makes it different from some of the other tools that I mentioned is it looks more at patterns. So keyword research is often based on historical data, so what people were looking at in the past, and kind of giving you a pattern about what people have been searching for. But Google Trends kind of helps you look into the future as well. So it helps you look at what people are searching for right now at the moment, or what is it going up? Is there something else that's popular at the moment? So I definitely recommend using Google Trends in conjunction with the other tools that I've mentioned, for sure. Yeah, that was a good question. Thanks, Laura.
Brilliant, thank you. The next question is from Sarah, and she asks, and this is something that I've been asked as well in the past. Oh, sorry, my phone's ringing. That's why I needed to be on mute. So Sarah asks, what's the best platform in terms of SEO? Are some better optimized than others, i.e. WordPress, Wix, Weebly, Squarespace?
Yeah, that's such a difficult question, because the ultimate answer is we don't really know. Like, as much as there are so many different platforms anyway. And I think if we knew the answer, then obviously we would all be using one platform. But what I would say is that obviously good optimization is best. If you can do the things that you can, obviously the stuff that I've mentioned, keyword research, that sort of thing is really helpful. So I'd also say, in terms of also go with what you find relatively easy to use as well. There's no point in having all the bells and whistles platform that you don't really use or understand and don't use to the best of its ability. So I'd say definitely go for what you feel comfortable with in terms of your platform.
Brilliant. A related question from Lyndon was, is there any advantages of using a Google site? Does that give you kind of preferential SEO?
I don't think so. What do you mean in terms of Google site?
Are you there?
I was thinking like building a Google site. I just wondered if Google search likes its own sites, because you can build quite a good site in Google.
To be honest, I'm not really sure. It's normally to do with the hosting with the websites that we kind of deal with. We have them on platforms, things like WordPress or Squarespace and Wix, all of those sort of ones. In my experience, I haven't dealt with a Google site. I don't think it would help with ranking at all. I don't think they prefer their own websites. But again, it's more about whatever platform that you feel most comfortable with and how you can optimize that.
I can answer that slightly as well. Sorry if everyone, unfortunately, Jasmine's colleague, she's put up with me quite a lot. Yeah, the Google one is a really good question, because you can either make your own one, or you can do it through kind of Google My Business. And in general, they're not as good. Like there are, as kind of Jasmine touched upon there are CMSs, things you can build website on that have their advantages for the user, how to use it and stuff. And they are all improving. Like historically, probably 2 years ago, if you ask that question, I would say stay away from Wix. Just run as soon as you start. But Wix, because of the nature of technology and stuff, people have to keep up. So currently it's like WordPress, Shopify, the ones people are talking about. Though you talk to a developer and they'll say WordPress is rubbish, and that's because it's hard to build on. But it's as kind of Jasmine touched on, it's what's easy for you. And if it's not good now, either look at other options or kind of pressurize the companies to upgrade what they do, because Wix has had to pressurize because they're historically known as awful in SEO, and so that's allowed them to improve. Yeah, I'll shut up now. There you go, Jasmine. You can remain here for a couple more days.
Another question from Carolyn Humphreys is asking you to just expand a little bit about metadata, and where does it appear? And I guess that depends on the CMS system that you're using. So is it something that you need to put on separately as a description of your website? Could you just clarify that a little bit?
Yeah, so I'll stick with kind of the example of WordPress in terms of where it appears. Obviously, like if you type it in to someone who hasn't seen the back of the website, you type something into Google and that's how it appears. So you've got the link, the title link, and the little description as well that will come up in search. In terms of the back of the website, so if you're using something like WordPress or Wix, it really depends on the platform. So sometimes you will have, so like with WordPress, it's best to install a plugin called Yoast that has the opportunity, you download it and it gives you the opportunity to edit the title and the description on the page. So if you clicked on like your latest blog post and you wanted to change the title and the description, you have the opportunity to do that. I think some of them do have it built in, so it's normally right at the bottom. So after you've put the content in, you kind of scroll down to the end of the page before you've published it, and you have an opportunity to change the title and the description there.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jasmine. A couple of people have said that they have their Instagram feed linked to their website. And does that count as regularly updating your site? Does Google rank those Instagram posts?
No, they don't. So social media is slightly different. You can have it linked to your website, which is fab because obviously it can help you grow your following if people arrive on your website, and kind of vice versa as well. But I would say if you're regularly posting on Instagram, that's great for social media, but kind of search engines and your website is a completely different, see it as like a different platform. So regularly posting on content and new blog posts that are high quality, you want to be doing that. So regardless of what your Instagram is doing.
Brilliant, thank you. Next question from Sue Bailey. What if your website is more of a portfolio than a blog? I'm guessing you still need the content on there.
Yeah, so even if it's like a portfolio to show your work, I mean, it depends if you want it in Google or not. If you've got an interesting blog post that isn't published elsewhere, you can use that as to be found in search. It really depends what your purpose is. If you're just using it to show potential employers and contractors, you may not even be particularly bothered about search engine optimization, because you're going to be sending people the link and going, this is what my website, this is some of my work. But by that same token, if you wanted to appear for something like food copywriter Kent or food copywriter London, you might want to optimize your homepage for that term and talk about yourself as a food copywriter in London on the page. Does that make sense?
Does that answer your question, Sarah? Or Sue, sorry.
Sue, yes, no, it does indeed, it does. Can I just ask a supplementary question? If you're just sort of tweaking your content regularly every now and again, rather than just doing a blog post, so if you're editing, let's say, your front page or one of your other linked pages, does Google like that as well? Yes. Sorry, it's just a slight side question. Okay, fine.
I know, that's a good question. Absolutely, yeah. I mean, a lot of even some of the strategies that we do, you don't necessarily have to write new. If you've got like an old blog post from a couple of years ago, you can repurpose that and put that as something new. So if it's a guide, I don't know, a guide for something, you can update it for 2021. And that's something that Google really does like. It likes recent content. So even if you're kind of tweaking around and doing things, that's definitely recommended as well. So if you're doing that, keep doing it, absolutely.
Thank you, lovely.
To vaguely connected questions. So Fee Beckett asks, you say no more than 3 keywords per post. Does that mean a post is better if it doesn't touch on more than one subject? And that she'd heard that Google likes long posts. And Linda Duffin asks, that it's sort of similar in a way, food blogs are often criticised for verbose intros before getting to the recipe, because of keyword stuffing. How do you balance the need to use keywords with brevity?
Yeah, so I think linking to that one, initially, I think even when we've written content before in the past, it can be quite spammy having the big intros first. But for example, if you're doing like a quick introduction with a keyword mention, if you're thinking about a person coming across like a recipe, for example, they might want a quick introduction. But if you're talking about paragraphs and paragraphs of text, even as a person, you think, oh, it's quite annoying when you just want an answer to a question and they keep talking and talking about things that are mildly relevant. In the answer, no, it's not that helpful at all. And keyword stuffing, again, it's a sign to Google that you're attempting to manipulate it. So Google doesn't like that at all. It doesn't like being told what to do. And if you're trying to manipulate it, then you're not going to win. They're going to notice, and they actually might consider pulling your result from search engines completely because they don't agree with what you're doing. So again, I'd always say, as I mentioned before, like write for people first. Definitely consider SEO when you're writing blog posts. It's very much a consideration that you want to put in if you want to be seen. But if you've got a perfectly optimized blog post and it's not interesting or it's a little bit spammy, people aren't going to enjoy reading it, so it isn't going to bring any value anyway. Is kind of my point. So definitely put people first. But obviously it is quite a delicate balance. And sorry, you'll have to remind me what the first question was.
Yeah, it was about whether you'd mentioned no more than 3 keywords per post. And so is it better to keep a post on one subject rather than?
I think the answer is it depends. If you're talking about really 2 quite in-depth different topics, then my advice would be 100% put them on separate pages and just link to them. So use the kind of the linking to other parts of your website section to kind of mention it maybe once or twice throughout your content and say, if you want to know more about this, click here. So you've still you've got that related content there available for people to read. But in terms of having multiple kind of in-depth ones, it's not recommended. But if you have, so for example, if it's like an FAQ guide, so you've got like multiple small little questions that people are asking, or maybe like an interview, for instance, that's absolutely fine. Having those like questions in that are quite brief. If you're covering massive topics on one blog post, it's not really that informative because you've got so much text anyway, and for Google it's not really that great. Referencing what you said as well about the what was it, there was something else about the multiple keywords.
Yeah, and you're trying to, is it better to, I'll read it again. Yes, no more than 3 keywords per post. Does that mean a post is better if it doesn't touch on more than one subject? Does Google rank longer posts better?
Yes, so the longer posts, that's an interesting one. That's kind of like I say it's a myth. Google does generally, looking at data, it generally does prefer longer form content, so i.e. longer content. But the big but to that is that there's no point in making a post longer than what it's meant to be. If you're kind of running out of words and you're finished at 800 words and you see that your competitor has got 1,000 words, there's no point in trying to fill those 200 words with a pile of waffle that doesn't mean anything, So I'd say definitely it's quality over quantity first. But if you wanted to do like a more in-depth guide, Google does like tend to prefer longer form content, but I'd say there's a big caveat to that, and it depends what people are asking for and what their intent is as well. So if they want an answer to a quick question that has maybe a 1-sentence answer, you're not going to do a 1,200 word guide on that. Whereas if they're looking for a lot more detail, again, like if you wanted to Google SEO for beginners, I can pretty much guarantee that all of those search results will be quite long, because there's a lot of detail there that people want to touch on. Someone wouldn't just do a couple of sentences and be finished. So again, it also depends the sort of topic that you're writing about.
Thank you.
Can I just follow up briefly on that? So how long is long? I mean, because you do see some posts, for example, on SEO, and from people like Neil Patel, who will write, like a 2,000 word post or on something. And I get your point about it depending on the subject matter and the complexity of the subject matter. Is there an optimum length for one of those longer, more comprehensive posts?
No. No, there's really not. I think trying to guess what the best length would be for your particular topic, you're not going to know. I mean, again, one indication, as I've mentioned, is to type into Google the phrase that you'd want to rank for or appear at position 1 for. Look into that and maybe have a look at the person who is position 1, at how long their content is compared to maybe the people underneath them, to give you kind of an idea about how long people are writing for. That might be a good way to kind of gauge how long you should be writing it for. But in terms of specific word length, like there is no optimum length, no.
Thank you. There's a whole cluster of related questions about what are tags and how to use them. And about, so Sam Bilton says, I have a WordPress website blog, the section to add tags and key phrases, which one relates to keywords? And there's a cluster of other similar questions going, also asking about Yoast and on WordPress.
Okay, so in terms of so looking at WordPress, when you've got that tag section, it's actually quite outdated. I'm not really sure why that's still there at the moment. So like meta tags, when you say, okay, I want to rank for this one, it doesn't really have any value putting the tag in. I guess you could put it in if you really wanted, but in terms of like having any SEO value, it doesn't have any. So you might be wasting your time in terms of adding in the tag box, when you can say put your keywords that you want to rank for here. You don't need to put those in, as long as your content has got those things in and you put your titles and headings and content body, etc., and you've thought about that and put your keywords kind of dotted around in that, then you really don't need to put your those tags in. In terms of Yoast, I would say with Yoast, always take it with a pinch of salt, because it's more of a guide. Because what you'll have sometimes is you might type in a title or description and it might go red, or it has a traffic light system where it's like your page isn't optimized or your page is sort of optimized. Again, if you've done your research and you've put these things in and the headings and stuff in, and it's still saying red, it's like, take it with a pinch of salt. Don't kind of panic because you're like, oh my god, it's only amber and I want it green, because chances are if you kind of added more keywords mentions to make it green, it might appear unnatural and spammy anyway. So definitely like take it with a pinch of salt, but use it as a guide as to like how well you're doing. But yeah, definitely like with these kind of tips we've kind of spoke about today, I'm hoping that it will at least help you guys get a bit more of an understanding about how to use keywords and the plugin as well.
Also, if you don't mind, I add on the tags, because there's 2 types of tags. I think this is maybe where it gets a bit confusing with WordPress. There's like tags, what you're talking about, the keywords, that's in Yoast. And then, yeah, reflecting what Jasmine said, no point in them, to be honest, because even they're not negative for SEO, but they're definitely not positive for SEO, but they are negative if you're focusing on Bing, because historically 10 years ago, SEO people tried to cheat the system, and by that they just used to write everything related to what they thought that page was in the keyword, and it got silly in the sense that people would be like, nude photos of Britney Spears, because there'd be any way to get someone on that website, they would try anything. So that's been completely cut out. The tags you may be talking about are sometimes on the right hand side, it says put tags related to this post, and that's a bit of a web developer thing as well, because it allows you to associate blog to recipes and stuff like that. Again, no benefit to SEO. There may be some benefit to your website, but when talking about SEO, there's no benefit there.
That nicely segues into another question from Susie Carter that says, if I write a recipe in a blog post, is it important to use the word recipe in the title, or is it okay to just write a recipe using numbered stages, lists, or should I use a proper recipe plugin?
To be honest, I wouldn't know unless I looked at the recipe plugin whether it was any good or not. But you definitely don't need one. It's more than acceptable to just do like the step-by-step. If you want to put it in the blog post, that's absolutely fine. I think in terms of the title, it's ultimately whether it's relevant. If it is a recipe, then you might want to say in the title and in the metadata whether it is a recipe or not. If it's not, then you don't need to put one in. If you're doing a blog post accompanying a recipe, you might want to target or use keywords that are related but don't necessarily have the word recipe in them, and then you might link to the page that has the recipe on it, which will be called recipe. Does that make sense? So your goal as well is to not have multiple pages about exactly the same thing, because if you've got multiple pages about exactly the same thing, essentially they'll be competing against each other in Google search. And if Google's not sure which one is the one that you want to appear, they might, if they're confused, they'll pull both. So you might not even rank for anything. So that's probably a really important point as well. If you're going to be writing about topics that are similar, just be careful what keywords you use, and don't target the same ones, because then that could actually be detrimental to your website as well.
That's good. We've got a lot more questions if you've still got time, Jasmine.
I've still got time. If you guys want to keep going, that's fine by me. I'm happy.
So another question was about the benefits of reciprocal links, and if you could explain.
Yeah, so that's actually quite a touchy subject. So historically, when we're talking kind of when SEO first emerged, they do kind of things called link farms and reciprocal links. So essentially it's kind of, I'll scratch your back, you scratch mine. So I'll link to your website and you link to mine. That isn't good practice at all. In terms of like, particularly if it's like a transactional benefit, so you're doing it purely for the sake of a link. If it comes across that just by chance, like you've both got relevant data, or like you've both attended an event, or for example, one company like today, like if we linked to the Guild of Food Writers website and then you linked to Kayo Digital's, that wouldn't be detrimental because it's relevant. So it's not, it's just kind of because you're talking about the same topic. But if we're talking about a situation where it's not related at all and you're just trying to get links for the sake of getting links for an SEO benefit, there is none. In fact, it can be a really bad thing. So I'd say definitely avoid doing it if you can.
Thank you. Is Judy still there? She had a question about YouTube.
Yes, I am. Jasmine, I want to ask you something. How much does the title matter in either your blog or a YouTube channel? The blog is one thing, but I'm actually more interested in helping my YouTube channel get more views. And I'm not sure if you have any advice on that, because when I'm getting the video ready to put onto YouTube, there's lots of questions that are asked, and I don't know whether there's any sort of detail in that I'm not filling in that I should be. Do you have any help on that?
I mean, whilst I kind of YouTube SEO isn't my specialty, I can give you a little bit of advice on that. So YouTube in itself is a bit like a search engine, because you're searching for things and the best result kind of comes up on top. So it is fairly similar in that sense. In relation to your question with titles, I'd say yes, that title is very important, and kind of, I would say, treat it in the same way as I've mentioned with the titles of blog posts. If it's relevant and you want to rank for a certain keyword, put it in your title, as long as it sounds good. If you're literally trying to shove all the keywords into a title and it sounds awful, don't do it. But if I don't know, I'm trying to think of an example. If you had a specific recipe that you wanted to rank for on YouTube, if you're doing a cook along or something, and you're talking about egg recipes or egg breakfast recipes, you want to put that in your title, absolutely. In terms of other YouTube optimization things,
I can help if you want that one.
Yeah, Carrie, go for it.
Cool. That's a rare thing I actually rare thing I've actually done at work, Judy. So YouTube is really interesting, like Jasmine touched. Second biggest search engine in the world, Google's #1. So a lot of stuff that Jasmine's rightly spoke about today is perfect for YouTube in the sense of that keyword research. But sometimes it's easy enough with YouTube to just go onto YouTube, search for what you want to write a video on. So let's go back to the egg recipes and see how many people have done it, because straight away you already know the competition. If not many people have done a video about it, then you're already at an advantage there. And that reflects your question about the title, because your title will have to reflect what people are searching. If you notice, you go on YouTube, type in, I don't know, Gordon Ramsay omelette recipe. The first one will be Gordon Ramsay doing an omelette recipe, and the title will be very similar. The big difference between YouTube and that is you can kind of push on the idea that you can help this, but also you're a bit reliant on the gods, is how many people view it, how many people like it, how many people comment on it. So realistically, if you've got the demand there, so people type in the egg recipes, in theory, you have the opportunity to kind of people to find it naturally, organically, and then hopefully it will grow. Of course, you can do the stuff like sharing on social media to drive people to it, but that's really the hard part. And I know you've got tags and stuff as well. You can say this is an omelette recipe and stuff, but yeah, it's a different world, but the title is very important.
Thank you. One other thing, actually, when I meant title, I'm also talking about the name of my YouTube channel, and I've been told that it's a big mistake and I should change it. Is the name of the channel very important too in searching?
What's your name?
Well, the name of my channel is called Kitchen Games, Judy Jackson Kitchen Games. And somebody suggested I should just change it to Granny Judy Cooks. And they think that would be much better and it would start going better. But
I don't know. I think that's more like probably less about SEO, more about like the branding, the positioning.
mm-hmm.
I think so. I wouldn't want to give you bad advice on this, Judy, because I like both those names.
Okay.
So but yeah, I think that's more kind of branding and positioning. I'll watch either, so that's fine.
Thanks a lot.
Another question, which is probably another whole webinar, is about Google ads and are they worth the money?
Yeah, this is for Harry, this one.
Are they worth the money? Probably the best response to that is, what are you willing to spend? And by that I mean, and it sounds really difficult, they are worth their money if you're getting what we call ROAS, return on ad spend. So if you've got a client, for example, a butcher, they're happy to spend £10 per inquiry, then that's what you test. You can forecast in Google Ads and say, I want to target these terms. How much am I likely to spend to generate an inquiry? And it becomes a little bit of a maths game, to be honest, because you say, okay, if I spend 100 quid, I'm going to get 2 inquiries. On average, one person will kind of say, yes, that's worth £200 to me. Then add like the expensive of the product, then you kind of work out, is there a profit? So I would always say yes, but the idea, the real difference between SEO and ads is SEO is kind of is a little bit harder to forecast profit coming in, but you know when you're at the top, you're doing very well for yourself. It's a longer game, but you get kind of the benefit from it. Ads is you turn the tap on, you see what works. If it doesn't work, you can turn it off. But of course, ads has the expense to it that you're paying. They both have real benefits. They both work really well together as well, because Google makes all its money through ads. So it's not ever going to make that a negative to click on, but it's kind of like that understanding. So I'd always say it's worth it, but you have to come to the table with a number of how much you're willing to spend per inquiry. If it goes over that, you turn it off. Same with Facebook ads, just turn it off.
Can I ask a supplementary on that? Sorry, I know you can't see me. What about Google My Business? How does that tie in with that, the Google Ads thing? I never really understand the difference, to be honest.
Yeah. So Google My Business is the beautiful kind of epitome of SEO and customer service and where you are, in the sense of there are the local algorithm. So there are a couple of algorithms in Google. One of them's like a local. So if you typed in Red Sox, you probably can get it from any website around. If you typed in pizza, you're going to get local pizza shops appear, because you're not going to buy a pizza from Scotland unless somebody's living in Scotland around here. I can only apologise. Zoom makes it difficult. But actually, Google My Business is the opportunity to appear in those local listings. You're more likely to appear if you've got a good, credible, powerful SEO website that people like visiting, but also you kind of get that impact of people reviewing your website, or you're reviewing your brand, sorry, and saying, this pizza, Harry Dance's pizza, 5-star, always has enough pickles, something like that. Just make sure basically the reviews are there as well, because they're a fundamental aspect to appear, because you probably do it, and sometimes the simplest thing to do is just Google your brand name and see what appears on page 1. If you like what you see, you're doing well. If you don't, then that's when you start looking into it and saying, should I be getting more reviews? Should I be kind of looking into appearing at different places?
But that's a separate thing. Sorry to bang on about this, but it's a separate thing to Google Ads. It's a completely separate thing.
Yeah,
and it doesn't cost you anything. Is that right?
No. Completely free. You can have ads in Google My Business, but it's a bit niche. But yeah, no, it's a separate thing. It's free as well, so that's always the benefit.
Thank you.
Another question is about the Google algorithm and its regular changes. Is there any way for amateurs like us to keep track of the changes? Or
Blimey. I mean, if there was, I think I'd be out of a job. I think when it comes to that, if you really want to like know your stuff and kind of learn a bit more about SEO, Twitter is a good one. If you follow SEO hashtags, if there's been like a major algorithm update, so for example, if you follow hashtag marketing Twitter or hashtag SEO Twitter, sometimes it can be a bit busy, but if there's been like a really big important algorithm update, people will talk about it on there. So that's definitely one way for you guys to find out as well. If you're looking for like more up-to-date SEO news and you prefer a website rather than Twitter, there are a couple of ones that are particularly good. For example, there's one called Search Engine Journal, and there's another one called Search Engine Land. That there's a couple that will also discuss any updates in kind of the SEO world. So if you want to kind of keep up to date on that, that's definitely something that that you can do. But in terms of can you predict it? Like, absolutely not. It's kind of a guessing game. Like this week we've had a bit of an algorithm update over the weekend, and there's been a bit of rumble about that in the SEO community, and it's our job to kind of go, well, okay, which clients have gone up, which clients have gone down, why do we think that is there a particular problem with one website? It's really kind of troubleshooting, but looking at your own data through Google Analytics is another really good way to kind of look at how you're doing. And if you've kind of dropped off the face of the earth in terms of traffic, then there might be a problem, and this is where you have to look into it.
Thank you, Jasmine. I think I've run through all the questions on the chat, but if there is anybody who's still on the call who has an unanswered question, to ask now.
They can always email us as well. I say us, me, if that's all right, just so Jasmine doesn't. If all right with you, Polly, just share my email address after this.
Okay, we shall. And are you happy for us to send out the presentation to everybody that came?
Yeah, chilled.
Perfect.
Yeah.
We'll do that with your contact details.
Awesome.
Any other questions before we wrap up?
I think there was one there from Laura who's just quickly said Wix or WordPress. I think we kind of touched on that earlier, but personally I'd say WordPress, simply because it gives you more from an SEO perspective. You can add plugins. It's a more powerful kind of content management system for your website, personally. I think in SEO it does quite well as well. Harry, would you have anything to add to that?
Perfect as per. No, yeah, WordPress is one, I think.
Yeah, I think like this is why I kind of mentioned WordPress a lot in the presentation. It's quite a common one, and it is particularly good as well. If you're choosing between Wix or something like what is it? Is it Squarespace? Something like that, and WordPress, I would say choose WordPress in my professional opinion.
One last question from Ruth, and then I'm going to wrap it up. How often to post? Once a week or less?
I think it depends. Like, the answer is it depends. If you can produce like really high quality content once a week or even a couple of times a week, and you're not just kind of throwing something together to put it online, yeah, like post as often as you want to. But again, like the key thing I just reiterate is it's definitely quality over quantity. So as long as your blog posts are have had a lot of thought into them, and maybe you've done a bit of SEO optimization on it, and they're quite detailed, and they're not just like a couple of sentences just for the sake of posting. Post as often as you like to.
Good. Well, that was a lot of questions, which I think just only goes to demonstrate how interesting everyone found that. And
brilliant. I'm so pleased. It only just scratches the surface. Obviously, if you have any more like specific questions, pop Harry an email, and if you don't answer, I sure will. Poor Harry now is going to get inundated with emails.
I'm always comfortable with that. I'm happy with that, so that's cool.
You're very quick at replying too, Harry.
Oh, don't put pressure on me now. This is, oh no, 48-hour delay normally.
All right. Well, there's lots and lots of really positive messages in the chat saying thank you to you, Jasmine, and to Harry. So thank you very, very much for giving up your time. I think everybody's found it a really useful session. So we'll send out the presentation and Harry's contact details, so you can pester him with your questions if you wish. And
never pester. Yeah,
it's brilliant.
It's cool.
Good. Well, thank you both very much, and I hope everyone's enjoyed the session.
Cool.
Yeah,
thank you.
Bye.
Stay safe. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.